King's presence at the safety stand-down?
Yes.
And was there anything, what happened basically at the start of the safety stand-down?
King was behind when we all went to, they had held the safety stand-down at the on-base movie theater. And I had asked him to look for my wallet because I had misplaced it.
When you asked him to look for your wallet, were you already at the movie theater, or were you still in Hangar 3?
At the movie theater.
So how did you go about asking Lieutenant Mr. King to look for your wallet?
Via text message.
And how did you know that he was still back at Hangar 3?
I had texted him and asked him.
And at some point in time, was that text at the start of that safety stand down, or how did that transpire?
I had started texting him before the presentations had began, and when he texted me back saying that he couldn't find it, and I just told him to come to the theater for the safety stand-down.
Was part of your responsibility as supervisor to make sure that he attended the safety stand-down?
Yes.
And how long did he look for your wallet before you instructed him to make his way to the theater?
I'm not sure.
5 minutes, 20 minutes?
Maybe 20, no, maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
And you instructed him to come via text again, is that right?
Yes.
How close is Hangar 3 to the theater where the safety stand-down takes place?
It's hard to tell. It wasn't far. Maybe 5 minutes.
5-minute drive or 5-minute walk?
5-minute drive.
Now, at some point in time, did Mr. King, the defendant, did he come to that safety stand?
Yes.
How do you know?
I saw him.
And when you saw him, was that before or after there was a police officer that gave a presentation?
I believe before.
And when you were sitting there in that safety stand down, was there more than one presenter that afternoon?
Yes, there was multiple.
And at any point in time, did your command, or did your squadron take a break between presenters at all?
Yes, yes they did.
And when they took a break between presenters, was that before or after the police officer?
Before.
And when you got back into the theater for the presentation from the officer, do you recall seeing Lieutenant Mr. King in that theater?
Yes.
Where was he seated, if you remember, in that theater?
He was seating, there's like 3 giant rows, and he was behind my rows, a couple of rows behind.
Do you remember anything about the content of what that police officer talked about regarding driving under the influence in his presentation?
I know he talks about multiple DUI situations that he had, like personal views of his, not views, but like what he experienced with DUIs, and he gave us a rundown of the whole procedures, like what happened from his standpoint of the victims, the person who caused the accident, how much time somebody could get sentencing, and I think just I don't know, just all around what his job is as a police officer to do and different scenarios.
At some point in time, did you actually get a text from the defendant during the presentation?
Yes. When I seen him, I asked him if he had locked the shop up, and that was my text message to him after I seen him.
And did he respond back to you?
I don't recall.
And do you remember what time you sent that text message?
I do not.
We're taking a look at a report that was prepared by the military that I believe they interviewed you. Would that help refresh your memory, do you think?
Yes.
If you'd like to take a read through that, and then look up to me when your memory's been refreshed, please.
So.
Ms. Mata, has your memory been refreshed?
Yes.
What time did you send that text message after you saw him in the auditorium?
At 15:41.
I have no further questions for this witness.
Okay, cross-examination, Mr. Hutton.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
So you're responsible to make sure that members of your squadron attend the safety stand down, correct?
Yes, sir.
And how many members of your squadron would that be that were required to attend the safety stand down?
I don't know.
You're also responsible to make sure they sign the sign-in sheet that they've attended the safety stand down.
Actually, that responsibility is above me.
Okay. You're aware, are you not, that Mr. King never signed the sign-in sheet that day?
I was aware. He did tell me.
Okay. And actually, a lot of other people typically don't sign the sign-in sheets. Is that correct?
Yes. At this particular safety stand down, they had removed the sign-in sheets early.
Okay.
For some reason.
In fact, if you were to review the sign-in sheet, there's over 150 members of the squadron that didn't sign it. True?
I do not know.
Approach your honor.
Of course.
May I mark these exhibit number 90 next to order?
Did you say marked as 90?
90.
Okay, thank you. Report's 90.
Showing you number 90. First of all, as far as Mr. King goes, he's highlighted in yellow now. His signature is not there, correct? And if you were to go through numerous pages of this exhibit, there's almost on every page there's at least 10 blank spaces, actually probably more than that. Correct?
Yeah.
Okay, well, go ahead and, don't take my word for it, take a look at it. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so when I suggest to you that there's over 150 names that didn't sign this in at the safety stand down, that would be correct, wouldn't it?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Is that normal?
Depending on if somebody was on leave at the time, or if there was a special situation, then that would be.
Approximately how many people attended the safety stand down?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
650 approximately in the squad, correct?
I think so.
So if the 150 approximately didn't, would be around 500 that were there?
I guess so.
Okay. And the order of events was, after a brief introduction, was vehicle safety and then the DUI portion of the event.
Okay, yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay. The program started military time 1500 hours, civilian times 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Not sure.
May I approach again, please, Your Honor?
Yes.
Showing you another document. Sorry, Nathan?
It's up there?
Oh, okay. Number 8. Callie.
What number is it?
Thank you. Showing you Exhibit 86. Second page. The safety stand down started at 1500 hours with an introduction, correct?
Yes, that's what it says.
And then at 1505 to 1550 is the portion that involved the DUI program that was presented by the officer.
By a military officer, so.
Well, the 100 days of summer introduction from 1500 to 1505, 3 o'clock to 3:05, correct?
Yes, that's what it says.
And then from 1505 to 1500 is the safety portion that involves the DUI.
Yes.
Okay, so now you say you texted Mr. King at 1541?
1541 was the last text when he was already seated.
Okay. Now, he arrived late, didn't he?
Yes.
And he was seated, first of all, where were you seated?
I was seated on the right side of the stage. I guess in the middle, I guess maybe 10 rows back from the stage on the right side.
And how many rows do you recall there being from the beginning, the front row to the back row?
There was, I do not know the number. There's a lot of rows.
Okay. Mr. King, when you saw him there, was seated about 15 rows behind you. True?
Possibly, yes.
You remember testifying at the preliminary hearing to that fact?
I do not.
Okay, would it refresh your memory to look at your testimony just briefly? Page 110.
Page number, please.
110, beginning around line 19, and going over to 111 page, line 2. Here's the page. Why don't you just take a brief look at the testimony that you testified to, starting at page line 19 and over to the next page. Yes.
Okay, yes.
Okay. Does that refresh your memory that Mr. King was seated approximately 15 rows behind you?
Yes.
Okay. And that was near the back of the auditorium, wasn't it?
It was in the back of the first section before you started getting higher up near the exit.
Okay. Thank you.
Any redirect?
Yes, thank you. Ms. Mona, do you remember testifying at the preliminary hearing 12 years ago?
Roughly.
And would it be fair to say that your memory from testifying back in 2015, would you say it's the same or better or worse than today?
No, it's worse.
Today is worse than back then?
Today is worse.
Did you remember testifying back in 2015 that the DUI officer had not gone on yet when the time for the break when you saw Mr. King? Is that right?
Yes.
Thank you. No further questions.
Couple based on that. Thank you. You asked Mr. King to look for your wallet.
Yes,
You
sir.
were already there.
Yes, sir.
And approximately, that was around 3 o'clock, 1500 hours.
Yes, sir.
And he took about 20 minutes looking for your wallet,
Yes, sir.
correct?
Roughly, yes.
And how, do you know how Mr. King got from the squadron to the Bobo Theater?
Personal vehicle he drove.
Okay. So from the time you asked him to look for your wallet until he arrived at the theater was a minimum of half an hour. Would you agree?
I think so, roughly.
Could have been longer.
Not too much longer.
Okay. Half an hour would be a good estimate.
Yes.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Anything else?
Clear?
All right. Ms. Mata, thank you for coming in. We'll excuse you.
Thank you.
Ms. Bright?
Switching gears, people now call Chris Creel.
Do you solemnly state that the evidence you shall give in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Please be seated at the stand. Please state your full name and spell your first and last name correctly.
Full name Christopher Hamilton Keel. First name spelled Kristopher. Last name spelled Keehl.
Good afternoon, Mr. Keel.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Keel, where do you work?
I'm employed for AMR San Diego,
And what does AMR stand for?
American Medical Response.
What do you do for AMR?
I'm a paramedic,
How long have you been a paramedic?
approximately 10 years.
When you're working for AMR, how do you go about being paired up, or how do you go about working on a shift?
I show up to a fire station that I bid into with a regular schedule, regular EMT partner, and we log in, get our radios, our pagers, and kind of get dispatched to calls when they come in.
Is there a difference between an EMT and a paramedic?
Yes.
What is the difference?
The main difference is going to be the level of schooling, the amount of schooling, and then scope of practice as far as what an EMT can do versus what a paramedic can do, and the level of care they can provide.
Which one has more training?
Paramedic.
Do you have to be an EMT in order to become a paramedic?
Yes.
I'd like to take you back to the early morning hours of May the 16th, 2015. Were you working as a paramedic that early morning?
Yes.
What shift were you working?
I was working Medic 31.
What does that mean?
The Medic 31, that's just the designator of the station that we're out of. We're out of Fire Station 31 in Del Cerro, the eastern part of San Diego.
What, you were working out of Medic 31, what shift did you work that night or morning?
I worked nights. I've worked nights my entire career, pretty much. So it was a night shift. I believe it was 19:30 to 07:30.
Do you remember receiving a radio call around 1:45 in the morning?
Yes.
What was the nature of that call?
It was a traffic accident.
And is that something that you've responded to in your career as a paramedic before?
Yes.
Up until that time, so about 2.5 years ago, how many car crashes have you responded to as a paramedic?
So I can't provide a count. A lot.
More than 100?
Possibly.
Somewhere between 50 and 100, would that be a fair statement?
Sure.
When you received that radio call, what did you do?
We go responding, get on the appropriate radio channels and map ourselves to the location of the call. And just depending on when we arrive, if we arrive on scene first, then we'll start providing care. Depending on the nature of the call, if it's like a really complex scene and there's issues with access to the patients, then we'll stage at a different location and we'll wait for instruction to come into the scene.
Do you remember this scene being one of the first part that was simpler, or was it one of the second part more complicated?
It was a little more complex.
And when you got to, how long did it take you before you received the radio call till you got on scene?
I recall our response being pretty fast. I would say within a few minutes. I think we were pretty close to the location of the call.
And where was the location of the call?
It was on the 163 northbound.
And when you got to the scene, how many other first responders were there?
I know there was at least 2 fire engines, and then I believe one more ambulance, one additional ambulance.
When you get on scene, or on that scene, how do you figure out what your responsibility or what your job is going to be?
On that particular call, we actually were instructed to stage and wait a little bit farther back from the accident so we could receive instruction on where to go and where to pick up patients.
And what was your role in that entire incident?
My role was just being a transporting paramedic to get a patient turned over from the fire department. They're the first responders. Since they're the ones that told us to stage, usually they would identify the patients, and then they would have us drive up to a patient, we would pick them up and leave.
And when they say that all you do is drive up and pick up the patient, is it fair to say that you're looking to get in and out as quick as possible?
That's correct.
And is that what you did that early morning hour?
Yes.
Now, when you were working, is there someone else that works with you in your ambulance?
Yes.
And do you remember who that was?
It was CJ or Charles Wilmuth.
Which one of you was providing patient care and which one of you was driving?
I was providing the patient care. CJ was driving.
And do you know how long that you were on scene until you were actually called into action, essentially, or called to do something?
So we were staged, and I remember we drove, when we were instructed to drive on the scene, we pulled up. I believe we helped packaging a different patient, and then at that point, I recall that we didn't have a patient. Our patient that we eventually encountered was standing on the side of the road, away from the accident.
When you said that you helped package another patient, what on earth do you mean?
I apologize. We placed him on a backboard, put a cervical immobilization collar on the patient, and just helped get that patient onto a different gurney and into an ambulance and out.
And was that into the first ambulance that was on scene?
I can't recall which ambulance it was.
And do you remember that patient that you helped package, whether or not they smelled of alcohol? Is that something you remember?
I can't recall.
You were actually called to then, at some point in time, look after your own patient. Is that right?
Correct.
How long do you think that was since the radio call?
Maybe within 10 minutes.
And during that entire time, were you kind of waiting kind of outside of where all the activity was going on?
No, we were staged. We were staged for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and then we went into the scene for a couple minutes as well. We didn't transport that first patient, and then we were looking for our next patient.
And how long was it until you got that patient that you were responsible for?
Probably another 2 minutes, 2 minutes. Our on-scene times are, on calls like this, we have a 10-minute like protocol to be on and off scene, so everything happens incredibly fast.
And what are you doing? What are you doing during that wait time?
Which wait time? Like while staging?
While you're staging?
While we're staging, we're monitoring the radio traffic and making sure that we take the detailed instruction and do exactly as we're told, because there's a plan that's put in place, and if you don't follow the plan, then emergency scenes can get more chaotic than they already are.
Now, eventually you were given a patient by the name of Jared Molatoris to transport, is that right?
Correct.
And when you were transporting Mr. Molatoris, is it fair to say that you were then responsible for patient care?
That's correct.
And when you said that you picked him up, where did you pick him up?
I found him standing on the side of the road.
And when you were speaking with him, did he have any recollection of the crash?
No.
Did you try to get information from him?
Yes.
Did he tell you whether or not he actually lost consciousness?
He had no recollection of what had happened, so he couldn't answer that question.
When you were speaking and dealing with Mr. Molatoris, you mentioned that 10-minute time frame. Was your goal to get him off site to treatment as soon as possible?
That's correct.
Where did you transport him to?
UCSD, Hillcrest.
And any time during your transportation or your treatment of Mr. Molatoris, at any point in time, was he able to recollect any of the details of the crash?
No.
Thank you. No further questions.
Cross?
Very briefly. The person that you packaged, it's the assisted packaging, do you know which vehicle that person came from?
I do not.
Do you know anything about that person?
I do not.
I'm not recognizing if you saw him again.
I would not.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Keel, thank you for coming in, sir. We'll excuse you.
Thank you.
You may call your next witness.
Thank you. People call Jason Mom.
You solemnly state that the evidence you showed in this matter is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Thank you. Please be seated at the witness stand. Please state your full name and spell your first and last name for the record.
Jason, Jason, Baum, Baum.
Thank you.
Mr. Baum, I see that you're in a uniform there. Where do you work?
I work for AMR, which has the 911 contract for the city of San Diego, ambulance services.
What is your job at AMR?
I'm a paramedic.
How long have you been a paramedic?
Just about 3 years.
And have you worked for AMR that entire time?
I have.
Before you worked for AMR, did you have any experience or training in the field of EMT or paramedic?
I was an EMT for 11 years in the city of San Diego, 911 system for AMR and Rural Metro.
I'd like to direct your attention back to the early morning hours of May of 2015, right around 1:30, 1:45 in the morning. Were you working that early morning hours for AMR?
I was.
Were you working in an EMT capacity or a paramedic capacity?
I was working in a paramedic capacity.
Were you paired with anyone that morning?
I was EMT partner.
And now, when you're paired with an EMT partner, is there some sort of organization or agreement between the two of you who's going to handle patient care?
On a ALS ambulance, the paramedic will perform the patient assessment, and then based on the acuity of the patient, determine who continues patient care, whether it be the paramedic or the EMT.
What do you mean by acuity?
Severity of injury or potential for severity of injury, basically how sick the patient is or isn't.
And is part of your responsibility working on an ambulance to be involved in the decision to classify this a trauma or not? Is that something you're involved in?
Yes.
And who makes that call? Is it the treating paramedic or is it the transporting person?
It would be the transporting paramedic.
Back on that early morning hour, the 16th of May, where were you assigned?
I believe I was assigned to Medic 1.
Where is that located?
Medic 1 is located downtown off of Front Street.
Do you specifically remember receiving this call?
I do remember the call, yes.
When you received the call, where were you?
I do not recall where we responded from.
Do you recall how long it took you to get to the location of the crash or the response?
Approximately 5 minutes, I believe.
Can you describe for us what you saw when you got to the scene?
To the best of my recollection, I remember we were 163 northbound, just about the 8 underpass. There was a large truck in the center divide and 2 other heavily damaged vehicles in the traffic lanes.
When you got to the scene, were there any other first responders or emergency personnel present?
There were 2 San Diego fire resources on scene ahead of us.
And when you say that they're San Diego fire resources, is that fair to say that they were San Diego fire, either fire trucks or fire engines?
Yes, it was a vehicle rescue, so there was a multitude of different resources responding. And it was difficult to tell with all the lights and everything which resources they were.
Were you the first ambulance that was on scene?
I believe so.
What did you do once you got onto the scene?
Reported to the paramedic in charge of triaging and assigning the patients, and found out where we were needed. And we were assigned to the pickup truck on the center divide.
When you were assigned to the pickup truck, was that the white truck that you mentioned was in the center median?
Yes.
And what did you have to do as part of your assignment to that white pickup truck?
The San Diego Fire Rescue personnel were primarily charged with the extrication of the patient, and once they made enough access, we placed the patient on a spinal board and moved him to our gurney and then to the ambulance. We received the patient from San Diego Fire.
So that's kind of a multi-step process, is that fair to say?
Correct.
There was firefighters that were responsible for extracting or getting him out of the truck, is that right?
That's correct.
And do you completely, are you involved in that at all in making sure the patient is stabilized or anything, or do you wait until that's completely happened before you get involved?
It's dependent on the scenario. In this scenario, there was significant enough damage to the vehicle that it was all San Diego Fire Rescue personnel in there doing the extrication, and then they were transferred to the ambulance crew.
And do you provide them any sort of equipment to use in order to stabilize the patient?
Yes, we provide them with C-collars and head bracing equipment or other extrication devices that are needed.
But in this circumstance, you weren't at all involved until the patient was actually out of the truck, is that right?
Correct. The fire department paramedic that was on the first resources had already placed the patient in a C-collar prior to extricating him from the vehicle.
And did you later learn that the person that became your patient was named by the name of Jason King?
Yes.
So once you then took responsibility for him, what did you do?
did a complete paramedic assessment, head-to-toe examination, removed patient's clothing to check for further injuries, checked his vital signs, secured him to a backboard while in that process, and then established an IV and transported him to the hospital as a trauma patient. So,
And when you first made contact with him, were you able to ask him questions?
yes, he was able to answer some of our questions.
And was he answering your questions in a manner that was logical, that made sense?
Some of the answers were logical, such as him answering what his name, and some of them were garbled and kind of hard to understand what he was trying to say.
Now, in your career as a paramedic, have you been around anyone who has consumed alcohol?
Yes,
And would it be fair to say that that has a distinctive smell?
it does.
Have you ever treated someone who you believed was intoxicated or had a lot of alcohol in their system?
I have.
When you were speaking with Mr. King, do you recall whether or not there was an odor of alcohol around him at all?
I do recall a strong odor of alcohol in the patient's breath.
Did you notice any time in when you were asking questions or he was answering them, whether or not he was slurring his words?
I believe so. I don't recall completely if his speech was slurred or not.
At any point in time, did you ask him whether or not he remembered where he was or what he was doing?
Yes, he stated that he was driving his truck and that he had just left a bar. He was not specific as to which one.
And at any point in time, did you ask him how much he had to drink?
I did, but he was not able to intelligently answer that statement. It was hard to understand what he was trying to say.
In your entire dealings with Mr. King, how long do you think you spent with him in total?
Maybe 5 to 10 minutes, including packaging time on scene and the transport and turnover to the trauma team at the hospital.
At any point in time, did you ask him whether or not he had to drink?
Yes, I did, and he stated that he had.
He was able to answer that question?
Yes.
Where did you transport Mr. King to?
To the best of my recollection, UCSD.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Cross-examination.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
When you first saw Mr. King, was he still inside the vehicle?
He was.
And he was yelling in pain at that point in time, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
And how long was it, how much time went by from the time you first saw him until he was extricated from the vehicle?
Just a matter of a couple minutes.
And once you got him out of the vehicle, the very next thing you did was use C-spine precautions.
Yes.
And after that is when you started to talk to him.
We were talking to him the entire process that he was being removed from the vehicle, but we started our full patient assessment once he was on our gurney and on the backboard.
Okay. You put him in a C-spine precautions because you believed or thought there might be some significant spinal cord injuries?
The damage to the vehicle was significant, and the patient was complaining of back pain, which would lead to a high indication of spinal cord injury.
One of the first things you do is try to determine if the patient is oriented times 3, correct?
Correct.
Explain to the jury what times 3 means.
Times 3 is going to be somebody who can answer the question, identifying themselves, say their name, identify where they are, and the date or the event, depending on what's most pertinent for that type of patient.
And when you attempted to orient Mr. King, you found that he only able to orient times 1, correct?
Correct. He was
He only knew his name.
correct.
He was unable to tell you where he was at
Correct.
or what the event was that just happened.
Yes.
You also noted he was unable to answer most questions.
Correct.
When you asked him about what he'd been doing, the only thing he could tell you was he had been drinking at a bar.
Correct.
You asked him additional questions about that, didn't you?
I did.
And what questions did you ask him?
To the best of my recollection, I was asking if he was at the bar, if he remembered being in a vehicle, if he was alone in the vehicle, and to the events prior to that night. If he remembered any of the events at the bar before or after, to get a gauge on his mental status, what he remembered, what he didn't of the evening.
And he was not able to answer any of those questions.
He was intermittent in what he was able to answer and what he was not. Some of the questions he would answer and then would not answer the following question.
He was still giving signs of being a significant pain as you were talking to him.
Correct.
When someone's oriented times 1, sometimes their speech can be garbled because of the accident they were just in.
Correct.
You've seen that many times, haven't you?
I have.
And in your experience, many times when someone's involved in a serious collision, just because of the collision itself, there's a loss of memory around the time of the collision.
Yes.
And that's alcohol-free, drug-free, just because of the trauma of being involved in a collision.
Sometimes yes.
And you don't know if that was the reason why Mr. King didn't remember anything other than his name.
Correct. Right. Not.
Thank you.
Any regret?
No, you're right.
All right. Mr. Long, thank you for coming in, sir. Ms. Brown?
We'll call Gary Martin.
Please state your full name and spell your first and last name for the record.
My name is Gary Martin, G-A-R-Y-M-A-R-T-I-N.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ms. Martin.
Good afternoon.
Ms. Martin, where do you work?
I am the general manager at In Cahoots Dance Hall and Saloon in Mission Valley.
How long have you been the general manager there?
I've been the general manager shortly over a year now. I think it was October of last year that I got promoted.
What was your position before?
More of an operations manager, handled the day-to-day operations of the business.
How long did you hold the title of operations manager?
Approximately 9 years.
How many years have you been involved in the service industry?
Approximately 20.
And how many years have you worked with In Cahoots?
It'll be 15 years February.
What was your job before you became the operations manager at In Cahoots?
I was a bartender.
What were your responsibilities when you were the operations manager?
Responsibilities were included, but probably not limited to just making sure that everybody had a safe, good time, that I protected the business and the customers at the same time. So I guess that's a kind of a broad definition.
Did you have to have any sort of specialized training or anything like that in order to, I guess, properly learn how to serve drinks or be able to spot someone who's impaired or anything like that?
Everybody's required to go through a responsible alcohol training. I believe the certification's good for 3 years. It's something that's done online now, but it's a responsible alcohol service.
And is that something that's just restricted to servers, or is that anyone within a restaurant or bar that serves alcohol?
We require that all of our employees do it because they interact with customers on every level, whether you're a waitress, doorman, manager, bartender, barback.
Now, I'd like to take you back to the evening of May the 15th, 2015, in the early morning hours of 2006. May the 16th, 2015.
Okay?
Do you remember that evening?
Yes, I do.
You remember having to come to court at the preliminary hearing to testify about your knowledge of that evening? Is that
Yes, I
right?
do.
And when we had that preliminary hearing, that was, over 2 years ago, is that right?
Yes.
Now, what was your job that night into the morning?
I was the manager on duty, or the operation manager.
So what were you doing, or what was your responsibilities that night?
My responsibilities that night were the overall operation of the building, from observing customers, employees, to make sure the employees are doing their job, make sure that customers are having a good time, and just kind of just making sure that everything's firing on all cylinders properly.
Now, at some point in time around 1 in the morning, did one of your staff come up to you?
Yes.
And did one of your staff come up to you about someone that they wanted you to check out? Is that right?
Yes, we had a newer employee, so he was still kind of developing his skill. He was unsure about what he had observed, so he called me in for a second opinion.
Now, before we get to the night in question, if I was to show you some photographs of your, may I call it a bar or is it a saloon?
The bar is perfect.
If I show you some photographs of your bar, do you think you'd be able to recognize it?
Yes.
If you would, starting with 68, would you just take a look through the photographs? '68 through '74, please.
Okay.
Just look at them to yourself. Mr. Martin, in front of you there was an evidence piece of paper marked as 68. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
What do you recognize that as?
It's the front of In Cahoots.
Permission to publish, please, Your Honor.
You may.
Mr. Martin, is what's shown on the screen there, on the television screen, is that the same as what's in front of you on a piece of paper?
Yes, it is.
And when you say that's the front part of your restaurant, your bar, is that where people would come in and out of the building?
Yeah, it's the main entry and exit points.
Is there any other entry or exit points that customers can use?
Not in normal operations. We have emergency exits, but those are the primary entry and exits.
So anyone that was coming to your bar, would it be fair to say that they would walk up that stairs into that area before going into your bar?
Yes.
What are we looking at in exhibit number 69?
This is what we call our front patio area.
And we'll see in 69 when we televise it. In 68, we're looking on the screen, there's a large wooden railing, is that right?
Correct.
Permission to publish 69 here?
Yes.
I have no objection to these photos.
And in 69, are we seeing that same large wooden kind of railing from your patio?
Yes.
What is the view from the photograph marked 69?
The view is from the main entry area, looking outward into the parking lot.
So I walked up the stairs, and it'd be fair to say that if I wasn't going into your bar, but I turned around and looked at the parking lot, that's what we're looking at in Exhibit 69. Is that right?
Yes, you could say that the railing divides the building from the parking lot.
What are we looking at in Exhibit number 70?
This is the east end of the building, also leading up to the main entry.
Permission to publish, please.
Yes.
When you say it leads up to the front entry, we have a pointer here, Mr. Martin. In order to orient ourselves with the other photographs that we just looked at, 68 and 69, is there something that you see in photograph number 70 that we've previously seen in one of the other photographs in order to kind of get our orientation where we are?
Yes.
Could you point that out for us, please?
I'd say it's the railing that you can see right here.
And may the record reflect witness has pointed to the wooden railing that is almost dead centered in the photograph. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say.
Okay. And so would it be fair to say that what we're looking at here is, if I'm standing on your patio, the right-hand side of the building? Is that fair to say?
If you're looking towards the parking lot, if you're looking towards the building, it'd be the left side.
If I'm standing on the patio, like the view in 69, where they're looking out at the parking lot, would it be fair to say that this is then the right-hand side of the building?
Yes.
Thank you. And what are we looking at in exhibit number 70?
This is still the east side of the building leading up to the main entry. Mostly handicap parking.
Okay. And now if we move to 71, what are we looking at in exhibit number 71?
71 is the main bar on the main level. That's what you'll see as you enter the building.
As someone enters the building, permission to publish order.
Yes, no problem.
I have no objection to these.
Thank you. As you enter the building to your bar, what's the first thing that you come upon when you go through the front doors?
It can be one of two things. Depends on if we have a cover charge that night. So you may be going through a door where you have to pay a cover charge. If you don't go through that door, we have a beer bar area. So you'll either pay cover first and pass by a beer bar area. If there's no cover, then you'll directly pass through the beer bar area.
Now, as you continue to walk into your bar, we've got 71 that's in front of you there. Is that where you come upon when you say your main bar?
Yes.
So it would be fair to say that 71, how many steps in from your front door would you say this photograph is taken?
From the door, about 5 steps, maybe 6.
And you say that there's a main bar. Can you describe kind of how the layout of your bar is on the main floor, please?
Yes, on the main floor, as you see in the picture here, there's a large bar. It's approximately 20 paces long. The reason why I know that is on some of my slower bartending nights, I remember pacing it, so I used to count it off. But so that's the main bar. It's got 4 service wells. Can accompany a bunch of people.
When you say there's 4 service wells, is that places where they can serve drinks?
Yes.
And the area beside either side of the bar that we're looking at in exhibit number 71, are there normally tables and chairs there, or is it normally kept open?
There's normally tables and chairs.
And is it the kind of place that has tables that you would sit down at, like a low, like, I guess, dining room height, or are they taller, more bar height, cocktail height tables?
All of our tables are more of the pub style or belly tables, as we call them. There's no low tables.
Now, up to the main floor, once you go past the, once you walk past that main bar, what comes after that?
If I stay on the same level, there's bathrooms down the left side and dance floor on the right side, another bar further up to the right.
You mentioned that there's a second floor, is that right?
There's a second full floor, and then there's like another split level, so we kind of have 3 levels.
Now, what is located, so the first floor, there's a bar and there's a dance floor, is that right?
Correct.
First level?
Yes.
What's located on, we'll call it the split level, what's located on that level?
The split level is where our patio bar is. It's just 3 steps higher than the main level. So there's a patio and the patio bar that accompanies that.
And is that an open air bar, or is that closed in like the rest of the?
It's closed in, well, with the exception of windows that we lift up when that bar is open. So that's, I guess, the only open air that you would get.
And then you've got an upper level or the second floor. What's located on that second floor?
Pool tables?
And where's the stairway to go from the first floor to the second, all the way up to the second floor?
Referencing picture 71, the stairs are approximately 6 steps to the right.
When you say 6 steps to the right, would I have to, if I was standing where photograph 71 is taken, would I have to turn to my right to get to the stairs?
Yes.
So it would be fair to say that in 71, the stairs, if I'm standing there exactly where the photograph was taken, the stairs would be to my right going upwards. Is that fair?
Yes.
If I could get you to look at number 72, please. What are we looking at in exhibit number 72?
This is a view of the upstairs of In Cahoots, looking from approximately from the bar area down across the pool tables.
So in this photograph that we see, would it be fair to say that this is taken from the perspective of someone who's already walked through the second floor, not just someone who's just gotten to the top of the floor? Is that fair?
Yes.
That's kind of looking from the person who has walked through the bar, looking kind of back towards the front. Is that fair to say?
Back towards the front? No.
Okay. Could you describe what we're kind of orientate us as far as how the second floor is laid out?
So the second floor runs the length of the building. So if you were to take a look at, I guess, with that first exhibit was 68, where the front entry is. So behind you would be, behind and below you would be the main entry to the building.
We see in exhibit number 72 that there are, in the center back of the photograph, it looks like that there's 3 windows. Is that right?
Yes.
And do those 3 windows front the same area as your front door?
No.
Okay. So which of the walls then front the area of the front door? That makes
Directly
sense.
behind you.
Okay. So where we're standing now, would be fair to say if we're standing in the photograph taking the picture in 72, that your front door is below me, below my back.
Below your back, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And what are we looking at instead of number 73?
An area of some of our pool tables.
Does it also show, it looks like a railing there, is that fair to say?
Yes.
And where does that railing lead to?
That's our back stairwell that would take you from the second floor back down to the first.
So are there 2 different stairwells then to get from your first floor to your second floor?
Yes.
And are the 2 stairwells, are they located in the same portions of the building on the same walls?
No.
Which would be fair to say that the stairwell from the first floor to the second floor is on the front wall, your main stairway?
Pretty close. I guess that's the best way to describe it.
Now, how many pool tables do you have in your
6.
bar? Let's go back to now, you were speaking about the night of the 15th of May 2015, and you were talking about a newer employee that was working for him. Is that right?
Yes.
Do you remember the name of that employee?
I want to say it was Jose.
And do you recall whether, why he came to you that?
He saw a customer that he was concerned with, and since he was relatively new on the job, he wanted my second opinion. So he called me up there to evaluate his work, to confirm his observations.
When you say that Jose called you to come and confirm something, where were you?
I was out front.
And where did Jose call you to come to?
He came out to the front area and said that there was a gentleman that he was concerned about on the upper level by the pool tables.
So what did you do?
I followed up Jose up upstairs, and I had him point out who he was concerned about, and then I made a decision that we needed to ask him to come outside.
And when Jose pointed the person out to you, where were they?
They were, if you're looking at picture 73, directly to the right.
Directly to the right of the photograph, or around the area that is depicted in the photograph on the right-hand side?
On the right-hand side of the picture, there's the south wall, and that's where I saw the person that we were concerned about.
Okay. So that's at the back portion of your bar, is that fair to say?
Yes.
And when you saw the person, could you describe their demeanor?
When I approached, I saw a gentleman leaning on a railing, and it was difficult to pinpoint what was exactly going on with the situation. But usually if somebody's got either their hand or their head in their hand, or if they're leaning over, there's something wrong. They're obviously not having a good time or anything like that. So we wanted to find out more.
What did you do?
I went up and introduced myself to the gentleman and asked him if we could go outside and talk about what was going on.
And do you recognize anyone in court today as the person that you contacted?
Yes, I do.
And is that the person seated here to the far right with the short hair without a tie?
Yes,
Now,
His left.
my left, yeah.
yes, your left. Thank you, Your Honor. And when you contacted him and asked him to go outside, did he agree to go out?
Yes.
Could you describe his demeanor?
He was very cooperative. I introduced myself as the manager, said that we had a mild concern, and that I just wanted to go outside and talk about it and find out what was going on.
And in order to go outside, did you go down the back stairwell or the front stairwell?
The front stairwell.
When you went down the front stairwell, did he agree to come with you willingly?
Yes.
What was the next thing that happened?
As we were walking towards the stairs, I explained to him that it's easier to talk outside because there's fewer distractions, and that I wasn't kicking them out. A lot of times people get a little, I guess, defensive when we're taking them outside because they have the feeling that we're kicking them out. So I was just kind of explaining protocol as we were walking out front and observing as we were getting out there. And then once we got outside, I just explained to him that I just wanted to have him hang outside for a little bit while we, determined what was going on.
And when you say that you weren't kicking him out, what actually were you telling him as you were walking him outside?
Just basically that we wanted to go outside just to have a conversation because there's no distractions out there, there's no noise, there's no outside influences.
And do you remember giving or writing a statement in this case right around the time of the crash, right around the events of the morning of the 16th of May, 2015?
Yes.
And do you remember writing in your statement whether or not one of your concerns was that it appeared he had a couple of cocktails?
Yeah, I remember saying that I was concerned that he was either had too much to drink or he was injured.
Do you remember actually saying that it appeared he had a couple of cocktails and I would need him to get some fresh air and I would let him back in once I felt comfortable?
Yes.
say that you were on that front patio?
Yes.
What happened on that front patio?
We hung out there for a couple of minutes. I talked with the defendant, and usually when we talk with customers that in this situation, we just say, hey, just hang out for a couple of minutes. When we're comfortable, we'll let you back in, or we'll make a decision to go in a different direction. So he just kind of hung out there and headed over towards the area of our planter and made a phone call.
And the area of the planter, is that shown in? Is that best depicted in, is that shown at all in exhibit number 68?
Yes, it's on 68 where all the tall cactus plants are on the left side of the picture.
And how long would you say that you had the individual, the participant, and how long would you say that you had him hang around in your front patio area?
Approximately 10 to 15 minutes. May I pour some water?
Oh, by all means.
Be careful, it pours out really quickly.
Okay. Yeah, it does. Thanks for the warning.
When you were walking out with the defendant, was there anyone else that was walking with you?
We always walk out with more than one person, just for safety reasons. There was, I believe, 2 other employees.
Was that Jose and Andrew?
I know Jose for sure. I wanted, the only reason why I know that it's Andrew is that's just reviewing my statement from before.
So what was going on while the defendant was in the planter area outside of your bar?
So we were just out there for observation, and he ended up making a phone call.
Were you outside the whole time that the defendant was out, Mr. King was outside?
I can't remember. I would say the majority of the time.
When the defendant made the phone call, were you close enough to hear the contents of the call?
No.
How many other people, if you recall, were out on that patio at the same time as the defendant?
I wouldn't be able to recall. A couple people at a time, people coming and going, and
At any point in time, did you see him leave your patio area?
yes,
When did that happen?
I'd say 15 to 20 minutes into the whole evolution, he walked off into the parking lot area.
Would that be fair to say that's 15 or 20 minutes from the time you first contacted him?
Yes.
When he walked off into the parking lot area, did you see where he walked to?
I ultimately saw him hanging out at a lifted white pickup truck.
Where was that lifted white pickup truck in your parking lot?
Looking at exhibit 68, that would be, if you made a 90-degree turn to the left, it'd be down that parking lot on the east side of the building. Or if you turned right on exhibit 70.
We look at exhibit 70. We're looking at exhibit 70, and it's showing us if we look kind of right in the center of that photograph, is that patio that runs along the front of your bar. Where was the truck that you saw him to in relationship to the cars that we currently see in exhibit 70?
I'd say it was approximately just to the right of maybe like this Prius right here.
And you're pointing to a dark vehicle that's halfway up the side of the right hand of the photograph, north or just above the exhibit marker is Testifies, is that right?
Yes.
And were you able, from your position on the patio, to see whatever was going on by that white truck?
Yes. Well, there's some points where it's obscured, so I would have to stand in certain places. I don't like people to get uncomfortable thinking that I'm, mad dogging them, so I would step off to the side and just kind of peek over.
Would it be fair to say that you're actually monitoring the people that are on your patio?
Yes.
And you're monitoring what they're doing on your patio, is that fair?
Yes.
And also what they're doing in the park?
Yes.
Why are you monitoring?
Overall safety of the situation. We have a responsibility to all of our patrons and neighbors.
Would it be fair to say that when someone gets escorted out the front of your bar, one of the main reasons they get escorted out for some fresh air is because they've had a fair amount to drink?
Yes.
Now, how long, you mentioned that you watched the defendant, he was on your patio, then he went over to the planter area, and after about 15 or 20 minutes, he went to where the tourist truck was parked, is that right?
Yes.
And how long did you see him out by his truck?
Guess in 5 minutes or so, just a few minutes.
When you initially spoke with the defendant, when you brought him outside, how long was that conversation?
Maybe 30 seconds to a minute.
Now, when you saw Mr. King, the defendant, by his truck, were you out in the actual parking lot at that point in time?
There was a point in time where I had to escort one of our female employees to her car. That's when I really noticed him out there.
And how long was that from your very first time you came into contact with the defendant, Mr. King?
Guessing 20, 25 minutes.
And what was he doing at his truck?
He was standing in the bed of his truck.
Was there anyone with him?
No.
Did you make contact with him at that point?
At that point, no.
Was that unusual that someone would be standing in the bed of their truck?
I guess you could say that. I didn't think of it as one way or the other.
At any point in time, did you see anyone join the defendant at his truck?
No.
At any point in time, did you see the defendant with a female on the early morning when this happened?
No.
Now, after, I think you said you were walking out with a female employee 20 to 25 minutes after your first contact with the defendant, Mr. King. When was the next time you came into contact with him?
I was standing up on the patio. I heard a truck start up, and I just kind of peeked over and saw that it was his, and that he was trying to back out of the parking spot that he was in.
What did you do?
I walked out into the parking lot, and by the time I got out into the parking lot, he had made, I guess, the loop around what we call the horseshoe. The parking lot that you see on 70 wraps around, and we just, since it's a Western bar, we call it the horseshoe part of the parking lot. And as I was walking across, he had gotten to where he's driving north in the parking lot.
What did you do?
I walked up to the truck and said that he shouldn't be driving, and that we could get him a ride or like a Lyft or Uber.
And why did you tell him he should not be driving?
I was concerned.
About what?
Just his overall safety, because his overall safety.
Were you concerned that he had too much to drink?
At that point, I was still unsure if he had too much to drink or if he was injured.
And when you said that you thought he was injured, what do you mean by that?
Well, my initial contact with him was when he was upstairs and he was limping in favor, or he was favoring one side when he was slouched on the railing. And all of my interaction while he was out on the railing walking downstairs, he continued to favor his left side and even had a slight limp.
And when you saw him standing in the bed of his truck, was he favoring one side or the other?
No.
At some point in time, did you have the opportunity to review surveillance video of your front patio?
Shortly after the accident on the 16th.
And when you reviewed that surveillance video, could you see anywhere on the surveillance video that Lieutenant Mr. King was favoring his left side?
I would have to see it again. I can't recollect that.
You don't remember seeing that on
No.
the surveillance? So when you went out to the parking lot after the defendant started up his car, how much space is it, or how many spots does someone have to go to turn into that horseshoe?
It's pretty tight. I'd say where that gray car is that I identified earlier, there's 3 more parking spots, and you got to make a pretty quick turn to get through it all. So
once you've backed up, there's only 3 more parking spots before you turn in the horseshoe to come back out. Is that right?
approximately, yes.
When you walked out into the parking lot to the truck, were you walking quickly to get there?
No.
At any point in time in your contact with Lieutenant Mr. King, did you tell him he shouldn't be driving?
Yeah, when I reached, by the time he was facing north, facing Del Taco, that's when I said that he shouldn't be driving, that we offered him that we get him a different way home.
And he responded to you, didn't he?
He said that he was okay or that he was good, something to that.
What was the next thing that you did?
I walked back up onto the patio and resumed business.
At any point in time, did you call police?
No,
Is that something that you've done when someone leaves the bar?
we have,
Is that something you do frequently or not?
case-by-case basis. I wouldn't say call it frequent.
Do you remember what time that you saw the defendant, Mr. King, drive away from the bar?
I wouldn't, if I had to guess the time, I would say it was close to 1:30, because I knew that the last call was coming up pretty soon with our business.
At any point in time in your dealings with Mr. King, did you ask him to call a friend to give him a ride home, or think that he was calling a friend?
When he was on the phone earlier, when he was at the planter, I was under the, well, maybe he's getting a ride from a friend, or calling somebody out to to help him out with the situation.
And how long was he actually just outside hanging around by that planter?
Just by the planter, 3 to 5 minutes.
And when he was outside by that planter, is it fair to say that the surveillance that you have with in cahoots, does it cover the front area of your bar?
Yes,
It covers the patio area, is that right?
most of it, yes.
Does it cover any of the side of the area, the parking lot?
Not where he was parked, no.
Do you have any surveillance that's actually inside of your bar?
Limited.
Where is the surveillance from the inside of your bar?
It's mostly at the entry points.
that this night that there was actually a cover that night?
Yes, it's Friday night, so we have cover on Friday and Saturday.
Now, were you contacted by the police the following day about the crash?
Yes,
And as part of your the questions that the police officer asked you were able to track down receipts that were attributed to the individual that you, the defendant who you escorted outside.
yes.
How did you go about finding those receipts?
I received the defendant's name, and that's when I started, because every time we have a tab, we write down, the customer's name, so I just started pulling tabs that had his name on it.
And were you able to find tabs that had his name on it?
Yes,
And did you actually provide those receipts to law enforcement? at some
Yes.
point? Do you remember when you provided those to law enforcement?
I do not. It was shortly after the incident, probably within a week.
Was that the same time that you provided surveillance video as well?
Yes,
Now, the officer asked you regarding the contents of those receipts. He actually asked you about the drink contents. Is that fair to say?
yes,
Now, he asked you about how much is in each drink. Is that right?
yes,
And did you actually provide him with glassware that showed it?
yes.
Your Honor, I noticed it is about 5 minutes to 3. I do have a few more minutes with this officer, or with this witness. Would now be a good time for a break?
Sure, it looks like you're going into a new area.
I am, Your Honor.
Okay, so we're in recess until about 10 after 3, 10 after 3.
I'd like to take a look through this packet of documents, please. Do you recognize those?
Yes, I do.
What do you recognize them as?
Receipts from in cahoots?
And do they show receipts for certain drinks that you have that are particular to in cahoots?
Yes,
Dealing with, in the exhibit marked as number 91, is that there are 6 pages, correct?
yes,
Now, in that package of documents, is it fair to say that there's a handwritten sort of ledger or piece of paper that says with the initial AMF? Is that right?
yes,
And does AMF represent the name of a drink that you have at your bar?
yes.
Okay. And what does JF stand for?
My best guess would mean Jack Fire.
Is that a shot?
Yes,
Okay, and that's a shot of alcohol?
yes,
Fair to say? Now, the drink AMF, it actually stands for something with an inappropriate name. Is that fair to say?
yes, it does.
How many ounces of alcohol are actually in one of the AMFs?
Approximately 2 ounces. It's a variation of a Long Island iced tea.
And what are the alcohols that are in that drink?
In that particular drink, you're going to have gin, rum, vodka, triple sec, and blue curacao.
And JF, if it stands for Jack Fire, would be a shot that you would serve, correct?
Yes,
And there's also a handwritten piece of paper in that series of documents, that 6 pages, that says J/C, and it looks like DBL. What does that mean?
to me it would mean Jack and Coke double.
And for a Jack and Coke double, how many ounces of alcohol would be in that drink?
Approximately 2 ounces.
If someone was ordering the shots, if we go back to that JF, which you believe was a Jack Fire, is that a shot of alcohol as well?
Yes.
And how many ounces, or what is the size of your actual shots?
Our shot glasses are 1 ounce and a quarter. Plus.
Now, when you found these receipts, do these receipts represent the entire night that someone would have to drink? To the best of your knowledge?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
When someone orders a drink in your restaurant, do they always take their name? Bartenders take their name?
If they're opening a credit card tab, yes.
If they're just paying in cash, though?
No.
So if someone walks up to the bar and orders a drink, if I'm paying in cash, no one would know what I ordered. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say.
So if someone is using a credit card, that's when you would be able to write down a name. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, in your dealings with Lieutenant Mr. King, how much time would you actually say that you spent to him in the close proximity, less than 5 feet?
I'm sorry.
At any point in time when you were dealing with Mr. King, did you have a conversation with him, stand within a conversational distance about 5 feet?
Minimally, yes.
By minimum, would you say less than 5 minutes?
Less than a minute.
And did you smell alcohol on him?
No.
When you were asking him any questions, when you spent that time with him on your front patio, did you ask him any questions?
I just told him that we were mainly concerned about him being inside the building and that I was going to have him hang outside for observation, and then when we were comfortable that we would let him back in.
But at any point in time, did you ask him questions about what his evening was or anything like to that effect?
No.
And would it be fair to say the only time you had offered him or asked him a question was when he was already seated in his truck? Is that right?
Correct.
Now, when he was seated in his truck, at that point in time, had you come to an opinion about whether or not he was intoxicated?
Whether he's intoxicated, no. I just wasn't comfortable having him in the building. Oops.
When he went to leave your parking lot, you weren't comfortable with him driving, were you?
No.
Why not?
I wasn't sure if he was injured or intoxicated.
Do you remember testifying at that preliminary hearing?
Vaguely, yes.
Do you remember actually at that hearing that you actually said you thought that he was inebriated? Is that right?
I can't remember, but if that's on my testimony.
At any point in time when you heard the engine of that truck, do you recall whether or not the defendant was revving the engine or anything like that?
The only thing that comes to mind, I don't know if he was revving it like excessively, but it was loud enough to trigger a car alarm.
I don't have any questions for this witness at this time, Your Honor.
Okay. Cross-examination.
When you first contacted Mr. King, you noticed that he had a significant limp. Am I correct?
Slight limp.
And with a slight limp that he had it all the way out to the patio.
When I was observing him, yes.
Okay. And you had a difficult time determining whether he was intoxicated or injured.
Correct.
And when you testified at the preliminary hearing, it's true, isn't it, that you said that you thought possibly he was less intoxicated and more injured?
I thought it was possible.
That was your testimony, correct?
Yes.
When he sat down at one point in time,
He sat on the planter.
and when he stood up, he didn't lose his balance, isn't that true?
I can't remember.
He was cooperating with you.
Yes.
You never smelled alcohol.
No.
And at the time you last saw him that night, you were still unsure whether he was intoxicated or injured.
Correct.
Isn't that true?
Yes.
The reason you didn't want him to drive was because you were concerned for his safety because he could be intoxicated or injured.
Correct.
And when you talked to him about him driving away, what you said was, we can call you Uber, Lyft, or some other way to get home.
Correct.
You didn't say to him any words like, I don't want you to drive, I think you're too intoxicated to drive. You didn't say anything like that, did you?
Not that I recall.
What you recall is that you said to him as he stopped, I would like, we can call you a cab, Uber, a Lyft.
Correct.
That's the extent of what you said, isn't it?
Yes.
And he said, no, I'm good. Correct?
Yes.
If you had believed he really wasn't good, in other words, that he was too intoxicated to be driving, you would have taken further action, wouldn't you?
I don't know what further action I could take against a human against a lifted truck, but
Well, you would have said, you would have continued the conversation further.
I'd try.
You would have said, you would have, if you believed he was really intoxicated, you would have continued the conversation and tried to convince him to not drive further, wouldn't you?
I'd have tried, yes.
You didn't, did you?
No.
And isn't that really because you were unsure whether he was intoxicated or injured?
Correct.
You never formed an opinion that night that he was under the influence, did you?
No, I thought, like I said before, it was either injured or intoxication, maybe both.
Now, how long have you been in business again?
20 years?
Seen a few people that had way too much to drink in your business?
Absolutely.
Often?
Frequently?
And I take it because of your expertise in this area, it's not difficult for you to recognize a person that's had too much to drink.
Correct.
Most of the time when you get a call like this and you ask somebody to step outside, it's really obvious to you that the person should not be let back in, should not be allowed to drive away.
At times.
And in that situation, you do not let the person drive away, do you?
There's limitations, but you know, we do the best we can, but there's only legally so much we can do.
You can call the police too.
We call the police, yes.
And you've done that before, haven't you?
Yes.
When someone is, in your belief, really intoxicated, might be a real problem on the roadway, you would call the police and
Yes.
notify them right away. You've done that before, haven't you?
Yes.
So in this case, with 20 years' experience, you are unable to conclude in your own mind when Mr. King drove away that he's under the influence or impaired or injured. Is that correct?
Correct.
You didn't know?
Correct.
Okay. When he drove away, which way did he turn out of the parking lot?
He turned right, heading north onto Mission Center Road.
And where is Increase located?
5373 Mission Center Road.
And where is that in relationship to the 163 freeway?
It's about, I don't know, 3/4 of a mile to the east.
Was that the direction Mr. King was traveling?
No, not at the time.
Last time you saw him,
He turned north onto Mission Center Road.
Okay, that's the last time you saw him that night.
Yes.
As he drove out of the parking lot after you talked with him, did you continue to watch his truck?
I watched him continue up Mission Center Road, and then we played last call, so I needed to start focusing on other customers.
As he drove away, did you keep your eye on his vehicle to see how he was driving?
I noticed that when he was pulling out of the parking lot that he came to a full complete stop and turned on his turn signal, and you know, right there, you know, a big traffic law. But so for as long as I could, I watched.
You saw nothing unusual with it?
No.
He had his headlights on?
Yes.
He did not have his hazard lights on?
No.
He did not?
No.
For the time you saw him standing in the bed of the truck until you heard the truck start up, approximately how much time went by?
A couple of minutes.
And you never saw him with a lady, is that correct?
No.
Also, at the preliminary hearing, you testified that you didn't notice any signs of impairment. It was difficult to make a judgment because of the limp.
Correct.
Once he was outside walking, the limp was less pronounced than it was earlier?
The limp was less pronounced.
It was more pronounced inside?
Yes.
And just so we're clear, he was totally cooperative with you the entire time?
Yes.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Ms. Bright, any redirect?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mark, when you first contacted the tenant on the second floor, would it be fair to say that during bar hours it's not well lit in that area?
It's pretty dim.
And when you contacted the defendant in that area, how long was your first contact with him?
Just a matter of seconds, I introduced myself as the manager, had a concern, and would like to accompany me, have him accompany me outside.
And when you walked down the stairs, was he walking in front of you or behind you or beside you?
I was behind him.
And what is the lighting like on the stairway?
Dim.
And you mentioned that you walked down the front stairway, so would it be fair to say that from that front stairway, there's just a few steps and then you're outside on that front patio?
Yes.
And that front patio at nighttime, are there any sort of lights up there?
On the front patio, yes.
What kind of lighting?
We have some floodlights out there.
Would it be fair to say then that the lighting is better on the front patio than it is inside of the club?
Absolutely.
Have you dealt with people in the past in the club who have been injured or hurt?
Yes.
How often does that happen?
Injured or hurt randomly, sometimes, somebody pokes their finger on something, or they turn their ankle while they're line dancing, or, it could be a whole host of things.
Would you say that it happens more than once a month?
I'd say average once a month.
Would you say that's remained the same during the 15 years that you worked there?
Yes.
So it would be fair to say that in the time that you've worked there, there's maybe been about 170 or so times when someone has, 160 times when someone has maybe injured themselves?
Yeah, like simple cuts, nothing like significant.
And how many of those 160 times did you offer someone to have an Uber or Lyft or a cab give them a ride home because of their injuries?
Never.
No further questions.
Anything else, Mr. Bowden?
Thank you. And that's because the injuries were minor enough that they were able to be treated if it involved riding, correct?
Correct.
Okay. The fact that it's dimly lit upstairs, dimly lit on the stairway, does that make it difficult for the man with your experience to be able to tell if somebody's under the influence or impaired or drunk?
I wouldn't call it difficult.
Sorry?
I wouldn't call it difficult.
And once you got outside, the lighting was better.
Absolutely.
And once you got outside, you didn't see any signs that Mr. King was drunk, did you?
Not immediately.
Okay. You basically, from your whole contact with him, determined that he probably wasn't cognitively impaired. Isn't that true?
Objection. Improper foundation calls for speculation.
Sustained foundation.
You didn't have an opinion that he was mentally impaired. Isn't that true?
No, I did not.
His demeanor was normal, wasn't it?
Yes.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Anything else, Ms. Bright?
No, Your Honor, subject to recall.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Martin. We'll excuse you at this time, subject to recall.
Thank you.
Ms.
Your Honor,
Bright?
with this witness, I did lay the foundation for evidence tags 68 through 73, I believe, as well as 91, and I would offer those into evidence at this time.
Any objection?
No.
Those are received, 68 through 73 and reports 91.
Oh, no, sorry, and number 91, though.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I do.
Please be seated at the stand. Please state your full name and spell your first and last name for the record.
It's Matthew Cavatayo, spelled M-A-T-T-H-E-W, C-A-V-A-T-A-I-O.
Thank you.
Officer Capiteo, you work for the California Highway Patrol?
I do.
How long have you worked there?
Coming up on 9 years now.
What is your current assignment with California Highway Patrol?
I am a traffic officer within the department.
And have you held that position the entire 9 years that you've been with CHP?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, in order to be an officer with the California Highway Patrol, do you have to have some training or go through an academy in order to learn how the tricks of the trade?
Yes, ma'am.
What kind of academy did you go through?
It's a 6-month living academy in Sacramento.
And in that 6-month academy, did you learn about signs and symptoms of someone who's driving under the influence of alcohol?
Yes, ma'am.
What sort of training have you had in not just that academy, but in your time as an officer regarding detecting someone who's driving under the influence of alcohol?
I've attended 2 different A-RIDE courses, which stands for Advanced Impairment Roadside Driving Enforcement, which is a bridge between DUI and alcohol DUI and drug DUI before becoming a DRE or drug recognition expert. I've attended 2 of those, and those are 24-hour courses. I've also just had my time and experience working the road as an officer in those 9 years.
Was there a course that you had to take when you were at the academy that dealt with driving under the influence investigations?
Yes, ma'am.
And how long was that course?
It's a 52-hour course.
When you were at the academy and through the A-RIDE classes, do you learn the signs and symptoms of impairment that you're looking for?
Yes, ma'am.
Are there any sort of physical signs that you look for to determine whether or not someone's impaired with alcohol?
Yes, ma'am.
What are some of those physical symptoms?
We look for unsteady gait, red watery eyes, slurred speech, motor functions. If their motor functions are a little bit slower than normal. There's the actual more physical things we look for is the strong odor coming from their breath and person. You look for nystagmus in eyes, and then the field sobriety test, which we learn to also help detect that stuff.
And if I was to cut off kind of your training experience to May of last year, would it be fair to say that that is about, May of 2015, would it be fair to say that you had at that point in time about 6.5 years on with CHP?
Yes, ma'am.
And in that time up to that May of 2015, how many DUI-related investigations were you involved in?
Between 300 and 400.
And in those 300 or 400 investigations, was there ever a time when you determined someone was not under the influence of alcohol?
Yes, ma'am.
How often does that happen?
From time to time, I would say 10% at a time.
And up until from when you started through May of 2015, had you ever had to be involved in an investigation of a DUI-related crash?
Yes, ma'am.
How many of those do you think you were involved in the investigation of?
Between 50 and 100.
When you're involved in a DUI-related crash, are you always the individual who's doing the DUI evaluation portion of the investigation?
If I'm the handling officer, yes, ma'am.
And is that those 50 to 100?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, when there is a DUI-related crash, is it fair to say that there are times when someone will be assigned to do the DUI portion of the crash, and someone else might investigate the dynamics of the crash itself?
When you say dynamics, are you talking about, I'm not quite sure what you're asking.
Let me make it clear then. At any point in time, if you respond to a DUI-related crash, are you responsible for that entire crash, or are there times when you're just responsible for doing a DUI evaluation and someone else might look after handling the crash?
As the investigating officer, it's the whole thing's mine. So, but then we will, as an officer who went in charge of that scene, I will give responsibilities to other officers as they come on scene.
Now, I'd like to take you back to the early morning hours of May the 16th, 2015, at around 1:37 in the morning. Were you working that early morning?
Yes, I was.
What shift were you working?
I was on the graveyard shift.
Is that a shift that you were familiar with?
Yes, ma'am.
What time did your shift begin?
I believe that was starting about 8 o'clock at night.
At around 1:37, did you receive a radio call?
I did.
What was the nature of that call?
We received a call of a vehicle traveling wrong way, southbound in the northbound lanes of the 163 with its hazard lights on.
When you say we, who are you talking about?
Me and my partner.
Who was your partner?
It was Officer Michael Oka.
Do you remember where you were when you heard that radio call?
We were Mission Gorge, just west of, or just north of the I-8.
And when you received that radio call, were they able to say where on the 163 the vehicle was?
The initial reports was just south of Genesee Avenue.
When you received that radio call, what did you do?
We immediately started to respond from our location. We started heading westbound on the 8, trying to see if we can intercept.
When you say we, who was driving that night?
I was.
When you say that you're trying to intercept, what do you mean by that?
We're trying to see if we can catch up to the vehicle itself. We're going to try to get in front of it so maybe we can get the vehicle stopped.
What is the next thing that happened?
As we're responding, we received an update from our dispatch that the vehicle that was traveling the wrong way collided with another vehicle.
And what did you do when you learned that information?
We kind of sped up our, I increased our speed of our patrol vehicle and was trying to get to the scene very hastily.
And what route did you take to get to the scene?
I took the westbound 8 to southbound 163. I then turned around at Genesee University Avenue and came back north on the 163, bringing a traffic brake into the scene.
What do you mean bringing a traffic brake?
Traffic brake is when we run it back and forth across the lanes, trying to slow down traffic and actually trying to bottleneck it. So when we come up to a scene, we don't know exactly what we have, so we can address the scene when we get there.
Your Honor, may the record reflect that the witness was doing a movement with his right hand and kind of a serpentine kind of movement going back and forth with his hand. He was gesturing about creating a traffic brake.
Yes.
Officer Cavatayo, I'm showing you what's marked as exhibit number 3. Do you recognize what's depicted in exhibit number 3?
Yes, ma'am.
What are we looking at, exhibit number 3?
You're looking at a image of the northbound 163 and the I-8 interchange.
Wish to publish, right?
Yes, you may publish. Again, I'm going to assume you have no objection, Mr. Hirsch.
This is actually already been.
Mateo, you mentioned that you came along the I-8. Is it fair to say that in exhibit number 3, the I-8 is depicted and actually marked on exhibit number 3?
Yes, ma'am.
When you came along the I-8, you mentioned that you were going in a westbound direction, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Then where did you travel after you got off the I-8?
We took the westbound I-8 to the southbound 163, and then we traveled southbound on 163. And it's not right, you can't really see the ramp itself, but we exited the freeway at University Avenue, and then turned around and came back onto the northbound 163, where you can see the on-ramp down at the base here.
There's a pointer there to your left-hand side. So if we look at exhibit number 3, there's the I-8, and then there's the 163, and then you mentioned that you came along the I-8, off the 163, but then you came back onto the 163. Is the on-ramp shown anywhere here on the exhibit marked as exhibit number 3 to come back, or the pathway that you took to come back going northbound on 163?
Yes, ma'am.
If you could point to that, please.
It'd be this little concrete area right here.
May the record reflect the witness has pointed to an area that runs north-south that is just to the left of the exhibit marker number 3 and to the right of what is on the diagram marked as 2C.
Yes.
When you came back onto the freeway, you ran a traffic break. What did you see once you got closer to the I-8?
As we approached the 8 itself, I started seeing brake lights. I saw a vehicle stopped on the shoulder, and then as I got even closer, I saw a vehicle, a large pickup truck, on its side blocking the number 1 lane.
So what did you do?
We brought traffic to a stop, stopped all traffic, and then me and my partner exited our vehicle, and I approached the truck.
Were you the first emergency personnel on scene?
Yes, ma'am.
How long did it take you from the time you first heard the radio call about the wrong way driver until you got to the location of the crash?
6-7 minutes.
What did you do once you got to the scene of the crash?
At that point, start to investigate and assess the scene to see what's going on, to figure out who's involved and if there's any injuries and whatnot.
Where did you park your vehicle?
We stopped it in the lane, so it would have been somewhere in the number 2 lane of the freeway.
And did you stop your vehicle actually correctly positioned in the lane, or did you move it into a perpendicular position?
To be honest, I believe I just stopped it in the middle of the lane, so I was facing in a northerly direction.
And do you recall whether or not you stopped it before you came upon any of the damaged vehicles or the debris in the roadway?
It was just south of the first vehicle, or the first vehicle we had seen.
And that first vehicle that you saw, what was that?
It was a white Ford 350.
What's the next thing that you did?
I exited my patrol vehicle and approached the pickup truck, and there was a group of people outside the vehicle. And I remember asking, "Where's the driver?" And they pointed into the vehicle. So at which point I looked inside the vehicle.
And did you see the driver inside the vehicle?
Yes, I did.
Now, did you then stay by the vehicle, or what did you do?
I went ahead and kept moving forward, and I had Officer Oka actually stay at the scene with the vehicle and start talking to the people who were there.
And as you continued on through the scene, what did you do?
I started to assess the scene as I'm approaching. I started approaching a vehicle that was stopped in the 2 and 3 lane, just north of the pickup truck.
What kind of vehicle was that?
It was a Toyota Prius.
And what did you do when you got to that vehicle?
As I approached, there was I got flagged down by a party gentleman, and he said that they had told me that they had pulled a male out of the vehicle, and he was laying on the ground.
And when this is happening, are you also calling for additional help? Is that something that you do, or are you just assessing the scene as you're going through it?
I was assessing the scene. I haven't asked for additional units yet at that time.
Now, just to backtrack a bit, when you noticed that the first vehicle, that truck, that F-350, did you notice whether that truck had its lights or its hazard lights on?
When we got on scene, I could see that the flashers were still, hazard lights were still flashing.
When you got to the first vehicle for, the second vehicle that you got to, the Toyota,
Yes, ma'am.
did you see someone on the ground, or were you just told there was someone on the ground?
I didn't see him initially, but then the gentleman had pointed him out to me.
And did you provide any sort of immediate care or for that person that was on the ground?
I just triaged him quickly, saw that, felt for a pulse, saw that he was breathing, and then I asked the gentleman who was there, seeing that he was alive and breathing, I asked him to stay with him, and then I kept moving forward.
Why did you do that?
Because there's nothing I could really do. There's no real aid I could render at that immediate moment, and it's still an active scene. So I want to make sure we have everybody out of the vehicle. I want to make sure if there's people who might be in worse condition, we need to address them as soon as possible.
How long was it until you had the assistance of the fire department?
Maybe 5-6 minutes from the time I arrived.
What were you doing in that time frame?
After I saw the gentleman on the ground, I asked if I was told that there was a couple other people in another vehicle that they had pulled out. And then I asked where the driver was for the Prius, and at that point somebody told me they were still in the car.
And after you, I'm assuming you then walked around all the way to the front of the scene to where the Prius was,
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
After you walked through where the Prius was and the other individuals, what were your responsibilities at that point in time?
At that point in time, I'm now the investigating officer, so I start requesting additional units, additional medical units, knowing I have multiple victims, and requesting other units to bring in brakes to shut down the freeway, and additional resources.
And you mentioned that it was about 6 minutes until the fire arrived, is that right?
Approximately, yes, ma'am.
And before the fire department arrived, were there any other CHP officers who were able to come and assist?
Not at that very immediate moment, no.
Now, because you became then the primary officer on the case, is it fair to say that you were responsible for investigating this case and the cause of the crash, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you do that?
Yes, ma'am.
At some point in time, did you have contact with the driver of the truck, the F-350?
I did.
When did you first have contact with that person?
When he was being placed into the back of the ambulance.
When he was placed in the back of the ambulance, did you ask him any questions about his name or anything like that?
Yes, ma'am.
Was he able to answer your questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Was he able to answer your questions in a meaningful way, like he was answering responsibly to what you were asking?
He was dazed and confused. When I asked him his name, he was able to tell me his name. His name was Jason. But when I asked him where he was coming from, he was giving me an odd answer. He gave me an odd answer.
When you were first speaking with him, did you notice any sort of unusual smell on him?
I did detect the odor of an alcoholic beverage.
Did you ask him about that?
Yes, I did.
Where were you when you asked him about his alcohol consumption?
I was in the back of the ambulance with him.
And what exactly did you ask him?
I asked him if he had been drinking during the night.
And what did he tell you?
He told me he had been drinking quite a bit.
That was his words, quite a bit?
Quite a bit, yes, ma'am.
Through your investigation, were you able to determine that this defendant was born 7/2/93?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, you mentioned that you had how long was the conversation that you had in the back of the ambulance?
Minute, maybe 2 minutes. It was very quickly. It was very quick. They were trying to get him transported from the scene.
And when they were trying to get him transported, did you go with him in the ambulance to the hospital?
No, ma'am.
At some point in time, though, did you later go to the hospital?
Yes, I did.
When did that happen?
At approximately, I arrived at the UCSD Medical Center approximately 2:59 to 2:59 in the morning.
When you arrived to UCSD, just shy of 3 o'clock in the morning, did you contact the defendant again?
Yes, I did.
When you contacted the defendant, did you also, at that point in time, did you call someone to take a blood sample?
Yes, I did.
And when you contacted the defendant, he agreed to provide a blood sample, is that right?
That's correct.
What time did the phlebotomist come to draw the defendant's blood?
The exact time for her arrival, I don't recall. I don't, because her exact time of arrival, I don't remember exactly, but I remember what time we did do the blood draw.
Well, when the phlebotomist gets to UCSD, what's the sequence of events that happens?
Usually when they arrive on scene, they hand us their paperwork, which is a call slip, and then they there's several stickers that they attach to the blood vials and to the envelope. So I fill those out with the person's name, the charges, my name, my information as a witnessing officer, the time of the draw, and then I fill all that paperwork out, and then I hand it back to the blood tech. So,
And once you hand that back to the blood tech, what happens?
the blood tech will go ahead and then take the draw from the party and withdraw the blood from them, and then after they withdraw the blood, they attach those stickers to one sticker to each vial of blood, and then one to the envelope.
And then what happens with the blood once that happens?
They seal it, and they put it in a vanilla envelope, or a manila envelope, and then they seal it with evidence tape. They sign the tape itself, and then they hand that to me.
Now, you mentioned that you weren't sure what time the phlebotomist arrived to UCSD, but you are aware of what time she drew the blood. Is that right?
That's correct.
Were you there when you witnessed the blood draw?
Yes, ma'am.
What time was that?
3:18 in the morning.
And after that, did you actually witness the phlebotomist then turning the vial upside down several times to mix it with the contents of the vial?
Yes, ma'am.
And then she went through the process to put the labels on it that you mentioned and then give it to you in an envelope, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
What did you then do with that envelope?
It then stayed with me. I had my clipboard, so I attached it to my clipboard, and then wherever my clipboard goes, I go.
And at some point in time, did you actually have to impound that into evidence?
Yes, ma'am.
And how did that go? How did that happen?
Eventually, when I was relieved from the hospital, I went back to my office, and at which point I booked it into the evidence refrigerator at our office.
And what time were you actually relieved from the hospital?
It was around 7 o'clock sometime, 7 o'clock in the morning, give or take.
And where did you actually book that blood vial then into evidence?
We have a refrigerator in our office. It's a secured refrigerator. I drop the blood vials in, I fill out the paperwork for it, including the booking forms, the paperwork for the county, for the crime lab, and then the evidence forms as well.
And now, when you were speaking with the defendant at the hospital, did you notice any physical symptoms on his body as to where he might be positioned within his vehicle?
Yes, ma'am.
What did you notice?
I saw he had seat belt marks onto his left shoulder, from his left shoulder neck across his chest.
And where did the seatbelt marks begin?
Towards his left shoulder and neck, and then it ran across his chest in a diagonal manner towards his right hip.
So it ran from his left shoulder then to his right hip, is that fair to say?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, in your dealings with, would it be fair to say that you had a very brief encounter or dealing with the defendant at the scene of a crash? Is that fair to say?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you were at the hospital, how long would you say that you spent in the defendant's company?
Initially, probably a good hour, if not a little bit longer.
And in that hour that you spent with him at the hospital, was that the hour around 3 o'clock in the morning?
Yes, ma'am.
And during that time frame, at that point in time, did you have any questions or did you ask him anything during that time frame?
I reintroduced myself. I explained to him that I had placed him under arrest for the DUI, and that's when I advised him of the applied consent and explained that to him.
When you made the arrest with DUI. What did you use to have a foundation for your opinion?
I based it off the fact that when I contacted him, I smelled the odor of alcohol coming from his breath. His fact that his eyes were red and watery. The fact that he admitted to drinking, and the fact that he was driving. I had witnessed him in the vehicle by himself, and that he had been involved in a collision.
At any point in time when you were speaking with him, was he able to tell you where he'd been drinking?
He was unsure at that time.
And would it be fair to say that when you were at the hospital, your contact with the defendant, he was on a gurney? Is that right?
That's correct.
So at some point in time, you made the decision or the determination that someone was that the defendant was under the influence of alcohol, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you determine whether or not there were any other vehicle code violations?
Well, the fact that he had been driving wrong way as well on the freeway.
And is that a violation of the vehicle code?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know what code section that is?
To be off the top of my head, no, ma'am.
And how else were you involved in the investigation of this crash?
While on scene, when we had other units responding in, I started to assign people different tasks. I assigned officers to give statements. I assigned other officers to start the factual diagram, the sketching of the scene, to get measurements. We had other officers do the 180s, the storage reports for the vehicles, other officers to take pictures. So I assigned everybody that kind of task as well.
And were you also responsible for any sort of follow-up or witness interviews?
I did do some of the follow-up and some of the witness interviews, yes, ma'am.
And all that is part of putting together this DUI investigation, is that right?
That's correct, ma'am, yes.
So, if we know that the blood draw was at 3:18 in the morning, and the first radio call that you got was at 01:37, what time was the crash?
Approximately 01:39, so 2 minutes later. That's our approximate.
And why is it just an approximate?
Because if we have to go off of what we get, so 911 calls, so a lot of times a 911 call may be slightly delayed from the time that somebody's reporting it to the time we actually receive it. So it's a guesstimation.
So in this case, besides coming to an opinion regarding whether or not the defendant was impaired and kind of coordinating everything, were you ultimately responsible for putting together all of the diagrams and all the evidence in the case, or did you have assistance with that?
We had assistance with that.
And who helped you out with that?
Officer Rutherford initially started the legend and documenting the scene. Then we had Officer Oka, who started the initial sketch and diagram of the scene. But then we eventually brought in the MATE team to come in and actually do the full-on diagram itself.
And is it also fair to say that you have a felony follow-up person that assists you in obtaining evidence and things like that as well?
Yes, ma'am.
I have no further questions for this officer at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Hutton, close that information.
Afternoon.
Afternoon, sir.
Let's set the scene a little bit, please. You indicated that when you got the first call, the wrong-way driver was just south of Genesee.
That's correct, sir. Yes, sir.
The distance between Genesee and the accident scene is just about exactly 1.5 miles, isn't it?
That's correct, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. And I'd like to follow up a little bit on, if you're going northbound on the 163, there's an off-ramp at Genesee.
That's correct, sir. Yes, sir.
If a person took the off-ramp at Genesee, it leads you into a right, turning right onto Genesee.
Depends which ramp you take. There's 2 ramps at Genesee.
Exactly. There's a Genesee East that comes first,
Correct.
and a Genesee West that comes second.
Yes, sir.
So if you take the Genesee East that comes first, you would be heading east on Genesee.
That's correct, sir. Yes, sir.
Now, if you wanted to get back on the 163, there's an on-ramp right across the street shortly after you make that right turn.
Yes, sir.
And right next to it is an off-ramp. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
So there's an on-ramp and an off-ramp directly next to each other.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, there are no on-ramps or off-ramps between Genesee and the accident city.
No, that's not true. There's Friars Road as well.
Could be, Friars Road is, we'll strike that. We know the car's going southbound just south of Genesee.
That's correct.
Okay. So if the car is going southbound just south of Genesee, it could not have gotten on at Friars Road.
That's correct, yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So it's about 1.5 miles from the time from Genesee to the accident scene, correct?
Approximately, yes, sir.
Okay. And were both hazard lights still flashing when you got to the scene?
To be honest, I don't recall, sir. I remember seeing the flashers, though. I remember at least seeing one of the flashers, who I believe was the left side rear flasher going.
And then the pictures that were taken the next morning, a flasher was still going.
I
Recall
don't recall
Okay.
the pictures itself.
You indicated that Mr. King gave you an odd answer when you asked him where he was coming from.
That's correct.
He said he's coming from Oklahoma.
That's correct.
Okay. You did a background check on Mr. King, didn't you?
I didn't do a background check itself.
Okay. You determined that he was from Oklahoma.
Yes, sir.
You determined that he had an Oklahoma driver's license.
Yes, sir.
He never had a California license.
That's correct, sir. Yes, sir.
And you also obviously did a background check to see if he ever had any DUIs before.
Yeah, we just checked his driver's license to see if he had any prior DUIs.
And he had no prior DUIs.
That's correct, sir.
No prior alcohol arrests ever.
And not that I'm aware of, no, sir.
Okay. When you first talked to Mr. King he was in the back of a trauma ambulance, correct?
That's correct, sir.
Was he in a full C-spine precaution?
Yes, sir.
Tell the jury exactly what you observed.
So C-spine precaution is when they place somebody on a gurney, they strap them to a gurney, or actually to a backboard first, and then they put a collar. It's a large plastic collar that keeps the head immobilized and doesn't allow them to move. So it keeps their head basically straight in a position because they don't know if there's a neck injury or some form of neck injury.
And he appeared to be in considerable pain, didn't he?
Yes, sir.
And tell us what you observed that made you believe he's in considerable pain.
He was kind of, I believe if I remember correctly, he was moaning.
Okay. You recontacted him at the hospital.
Yeah, that's correct, sir. Yes, sir.
And you had some conversations with him at that point.
Basically, yes, sir. I recontacted him, explained to him that I had placed him under arrest.
And was he in the trauma bay at that time?
Yes, he was.
Still moaning?
I want to say yes, but I'm not 100% sure.
Was he cooperating with you the entire time?
Yes, sir.
He called you sir on occasion?
Yes, sir.
And he was totally respectful to your position, wasn't he?
Yes, sir.
He didn't do anything of a combative or uncooperative way at all?
No, sir.
Is that true?
That's true, sir.
You came back and saw him at 7:44, actually 9:44 the same night.
That's correct, sir. Yes, sir.
Probably when your next shift started.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you had an additional conversation with him.
I did, sir.
He was still in the trauma unit.
Yes, sir. He was in a trauma room.
And in the trauma room, he still appeared to be in pain.
Yes, sir.
And were you present in the trauma room when he was interviewed by Officer Klinskills?
Officer Klinskill's initial interview, yes, sir, I was.
Okay. And during that interview, did he appear to be in pain and discomfort during that interview?
I wouldn't say thriving in pain, but you could see he was discomfort. It was super comfortable, obviously.
Could you hear him say, ouch, or words to that effect on numerous occasions.
I believe I probably did hear him say that, but I also believe it was also because the nurses are doing things at the same time while we're all speaking to him.
When you first talked with Mr. King, he told you that he had quite a bit to drink.
Yes, sir.
He was coming from Oklahoma.
Yes, sir.
Okay, did you get any other questions or answers out of it?
No, sir.
Was he unable to answer the rest of your questions?
He just wasn't, when I asked him where he was coming, he couldn't tell me. He said he didn't know.
Okay. Now, when you came back and saw him at 9:44, you asked him some additional questions, didn't you?
Yes, sir, I did.
And during that interview, he told you that he thought that he had been in cahoots.
That's correct, sir, yes, sir.
So it would be fair to say that he was cooperative in answering all your questions.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor, subject to revision.
All right, thank you so much for coming in,
Not a problem, Your
Officer.
Honor.
We'll excuse you.
Thank you, ma'am.
And we're going to take our evening recess at this time.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, so folks, have a nice evening. We'll see you tomorrow morning, bright and early at 9 a.m.